I'm Phyllis. I live in my van.
Yeah, it could be so much better, but it could be worse too,
Darn straight. And this is a
right?
beautiful day. Well, hello, my tribe. I want to introduce you to this really interesting gentleman that I met at the laundromat in Quartzsite the other day.
Yes.
Would you introduce yourself?
Ah,
My name is
Uli.
Uli. And what I thought was interesting was his accent. I'm usually pretty good at placing accents. And I had no idea what his was. So would you tell me, that was the first thing I talked about. Would you tell me how you came by this interesting accent?
Well, the second thing I said, how much time do you have?
Right.
But I grew up in Germany and I left when I was 17, ended up in Israel in the kibbutz, the borderland. And from up there, I ended up in the North Country, Alaska, the Yukon Territory, BC. And then I ended up in New Zealand, the South Island, and Australia, and I came back here. So wherever I travel,
You pick up a little
I pick up
accent.
a little.
Yeah, definitely. What made you originally start traveling so young and so many different places?
Because I was in the Boy Scouts in the old country, and when I was 12 years old, I didn't get homesick. I didn't want to go home anymore. And then basically I started traveling when I was 12 years old.
Wow. How'd you end up in a kibbutz?
um, in a kibbutz, do you know about kibbutz? Okay, so you get food, you get a place to sleep, you have to work for a living, and you have a lot of time to think about things. And so I stayed in the kibbutz a year, and a year of thinking was more than enough. And then I figured out about the North Country, and so that's when I opened the world map and closed my eyes, and I came out in Edmonton, Alberta.
Did you really?
I didn't tell you that?
No, you picked a place to go with a finger on a map. How wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Right, right.
So tell us about your next adventure after the kibbutz.
Well, I bought a ticket to Calgary, which is just south of Edmonton, Alberta. And that's after I went back home to Germany to make enough traveling money. And then I bought a canoe up there on the Peace River. And originally I was planning to go to the Great Slave Lakes. But I also crossed the Fort Vermilion Falls, and that's when the canoe fell apart.
Oh no.
Right. So I hitchhiked back into Fort Vermilion with a fisherman up there.
How old were you at that time? About
just shy of 19.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the Forestry Service up there, they had to fly me out because there was a bushfire going on.
Oh my goodness.
And they flew me back into town, and then I hitchhiked, and I ended up in Alaska. And I bought no, in Whitehorse. And I bought a canoe in Whitehorse. And I stashed that in Eagle, Alaska over the winter. And then the next year I went back, and then I continued down to Tanana, Alaska. And then I got a liking for the North Country and living in the bush in the winter time.
What did you like about it?
Everything. Absolutely everything.
Well, it's beautiful, I'm sure.
It's absolutely gorgeous as long as a person likes the snow.
Right.
And I love the snow in the bush. When you get up in the wintertime and you put on your snowshoes or the cross-country skis, which I didn't have, but the snowshoes, and it's so almost otherworldly. It's so quiet, right? But that was no, that was before I realized that somewhere people wear flip flops in January, and then ever since then, I've been traveling south. I've been moving south. Eventually, I settled down in the south. Not settled down. I'm mobile.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always the south where I can wear flip-flops in January.
You're kind of done with the snow for now?
Well, I'm done with the snow, period.
Yeah.
And I still have the flip-flops in here, which I always put on. But right now, it's still winter time.
Right. What about New Zealand?
Okay, the South Island of New Zealand. When I was on the West Coast in Australia, I met that kid, a young man, and he was on the tall ship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not a hired hand. You pay for the privilege
Okay.
to learn, right?
Ah,
So he told me about the tall ship, and then I went to New Zealand, and I looked up the captain, and him and we clicked, and it was a tall ship. And I remember I jumped down from the dock onto the ship, and the ship was like 120 feet long or so, minus the bowsprit.
okay.
But it was a tall ship, and I looked up, and I was in awe. And the skipper and we clicked. And then he offered me, I can go with the tall ship, and I don't have to pay for that. And so I had to think about that, because to Vanuatu, to Fiji on a tall ship, are you kidding?
You can't turn that down, huh?
Well, and so I spent a lot of time thinking, and then I got to realize if I say yes to the captain, then I'll be gone. I will never come back to the West Coast here, right? And
It
so
was a commitment you didn't want to make of time, or
I couldn't make the
future?
commitment because I
you saw
love,
different paths going and you didn't want that path?
absolutely. So I declined, but the memory is there.
Right.
And then when it was time to leave,
But it would have been amazing.
it would have been fantastic. But then reality is I wouldn't be here.
That's
right?
true.
One or the other,
Right.
for me. But when it was time to leave, and I flew back here, but the captain, he walked me to the bus. And when I told that to people, they said, the captain really likes you.
That was an amazing gesture for him.
Mm-hmm. It was. It really was. But so I'm here.
But that was probably another benefit of that time, was that relationship that you had with the captain.
Yes. Yes, it was.
That can be really
Absolutely.
rewarding too, as much as the places you go and
It
the
was.
adventures that you have.
Yeah, it was really rewarding to go on the tall ship, to meet the captain, to meet some of the other people that were there, to climb up on the spars. God's country. When you're up there on the spar and you're looking down like 90 feet, 100 feet or so, and the world is so small, but it's your world at that time. And it was unbelievable.
How long were you on the boat?
Oh, just for the
ship.
rigging, less than a month.
Okay. But still, like you said, it's its own little world, different when you're on land and everywhere is around you. But when you're on a boat, it's like you're on a little island. You travel around with your world.
Yeah. It's a totally different gig. And over here, like last year, I bought that old San Juan 21, which is a small sailboat, but I've been making my living on the lake up there for so long, 20 years. but only in the summertime. And in the wintertime, I load it up and then I make tracks. I get the hell out of Dodge, right? But to be on the water, either it clicks or it doesn't click. And some people, they try, but trying is not good enough. Either it clicks or it doesn't.
Some people who can do it are suited for it, and some aren't.
Some people are suited for it,
Yeah.
and most of them are not. Yeah. So that's the thing about the water.
Yeah. I took scuba diving lessons sometimes, and you can think all day long that you want to do it and it's great, but some people that get in that water with all that gear on, oop, and it's a no. And they're right back out. So you end up with probably 20% of the people who started ending the class.
Absolutely. And if it clicks, then it's natural. But if it doesn't click, no matter how hard those people try, it just doesn't work.
Can't put yourself into that. You can't make it fit.
You cannot make it fit. And what reminds me of that, you were just talking about the scuba thing. I went to that offshore school up in Seattle, outside of Seattle. And there I got qualified as an AB, which is an able seaman.
Okay.
But part of the schooling is you have to go into a really hot place, and firefighters, they watch you, and you have the oxygen tank, you wear the protective gear. And if you're claustrophobic...
Yeah, it can be really, all the gear can be really claustrophobic.
Absolutely. And I am claustrophobic, so I was hesitant to putting on all the gear, but there again, it clicked, and I didn't mind.
Right.
And it was 2,000 plus degrees inside. And if you want to get the license, the AB ticket, then you have to pass every course that they throw at you. And then you pass or you don't.
Right.
But that reminds me of that scuba thing. It just clicked.
Right. I got in, and there was a moment for me when it is claustrophobic, and you've got something, in the mouth too, the regulator.
Absolutely.
But then you open your eyes, and whoa, okay. And then it just becomes not part of your body, but sort of, all the gear, and
absolutely,
it just becomes the way you breathe. And
so
you were talking about you were a cowboy at one point, weren't you?
Yeah. How much time do you have?
Well,
Okay.
As much time as you want.
Because at the time I was traveling on Cornelius, that saddle horse, Corny for short. And then he took off one time in central California. And in the morning I looked for Cornelius and he was gone. And then Dan Hearn, the owner of the cattle ranch, he said basically, if you're looking for a horse, he's down the fence line. And I thanked him, so I caught Cornelius. But before Dan left, he said, if you make it down to the ranch, you stop by. And then I ended up working as a cowboy for a number of years.
Did you like it?
Yeah. Every job that I ever had, including the dishwashing job up in Dawson City, I liked it. Everything I ever did, I liked it. Because whenever I worked for a purpose, and the purpose was traveling money and the experience.
Yeah.
But the traveling money, you have to work in order to get the traveling money. And so, I like it.
And you still do that now? You get odd jobs every once in a while?
Yeah, I get odd jobs on the side, usually get paid under the table. When I made a living for the 20 years up on the lake, that was a career. But then I decided 20 years is long enough.
Sure. And
to hell with the career aspect.
You were talking about the blue-green algae you were working with. What was that about?
Yeah, so I done that blue-green algae, and the problem was because it was a career and second nature, and then the boss realized if he gives me a title, then he doesn't have to pay me for overtime, right? That's
Their
the law.
salary, yeah, instead of hourly.
Absolutely. So he put me on salary, but he also made me the general manager of that outfit on the lake. But like I said, 20 years was long enough of that
And what were you
nonsense.
doing there?
Oh, dude.
The job, what was the job?
Anything. I'm on the water in the fast boat. First come, first serve, because there are a number of outfits up there. And I have to locate the algae slick. Then I take the samples, I put them under the microscope, and if they're fit for harvesting, then I call the outfit in, and then the crew comes in and they fire up. And the other part of the job was simply to make sure that everything that we anchored on the water was still there. So on good days and windy days, I was always on the lake 7 days a week, literally.
Wow.
And that lasted for 4.5 months, 7 days a week. But like 20 years was long enough.
Yeah.
And then I got the hell out of Dodge.
You talked about rescuing some kind of bird?
Oh! Yes, birds of prey, the rescue. And I never forget the birds of prey. Like I lived in a cowboy teepee for 6 months out of the year on the premises. And I go to sleep with the cry of the birds of prey. And I wake up with the cry of the birds of prey. But I never forget how one time that I got to know people up there. And then the cop shows up, a cruiser, and he found a bald eagle, right? And the bird was scorched, so it couldn't fly away. And then so he brings that eagle to the rehab, and almost always people put birds of prey in a cage, in an enclosure, because the talons, they're wicked, right? But that eagle was sitting on the back seat of the cruiser.
He was injured.
No, he was just gorged. He ate too much food.
Oh, I thought you said scorched. I thought he
Oh, no.
Oh, he
gorged.
He was so full he couldn't fly.
He couldn't fly, right? So the cop took the eagle and put him on the back seat of the cruiser.
So this eagle that wasn't injured just let him pick him up and put him in the car.
Evidently. And so
that seems kind of crazy.
Well, yeah, it seems kind of crazy, but he was a cop. He knew what he was doing. And it was so funny. And then we took that eagle in the enclosures and kept him in there for a few days. And then I'm sure he got released.
How did you end up working there or volunteering there?
Oh, because when I was a kid, for a special treat, we went up into the hills where they have those castles in the vineyards and stuff.
Okay.
And that's where they fly birds of prey. Flying at the falconry is one of the oldest the trades ever since people were around. But when I called it quits on the algae industry, then I met that lady who had the rehab, and I explained the situation. And then she says, come on out here. And it just clicked. So I just furthered, not education, but that knowledge. And I just went ahead. So I stayed up there for 5 or 6 summers. And then I called it quits up there, and then I hit the road full time.
How
Again,
long ago was that?
a lifetime ago, um, maybe 4 years, 5 years. I don't know.
So you've been living in your minivan since then?
Well, I had the minivan before that. I had a different one, and then I had a station wagon before that. Before that, I had one of the Toyota Land Cruisers, one of the old ones. And before that, I had a Jeep, the old Jeep. And before that, I had a Chevy Nova.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Right.
The smaller vehicle.
Yeah. But change is good.
And you said you had a boat in Oregon?
I still have that little sailboat up there, that San Juan 21.
And you live on the boat sometimes?
Usually I live on the boat, or I live in the canoe, or the kayak on the coast, the ocean-going kayak.
Well, you've really had an amazing array of adventurous kind of jobs and locations.
Oh, I didn't
Did we
tell
miss
you.
one?
We missed a lot of them.
Well, throw in one more.
Morgan City, Louisiana, in the bayous.
Okay.
So when I was riding the freight trains when I was a hobo, somehow through Texas, and somehow I ended up in Morgan City, Louisiana. And there I told them that I need work, and they said, okay. So in a roustabout camp, which is a dormitory for people who are willing to work, but they're down on their luck. So the outfit gets part of your wages, and you get the remainder of the wages. So I worked in Louisiana, in Morgan City, and that's where cover barges, right? Put the tarps on it so it doesn't get wet and stuff. And so I was introduced to flip-flops in January, reintroduced to flip-flops in January, to the warm weather. And ever since I worked down there, I got that thing for the bayous. And I don't have the canoe with me now, but in the time past, I always have a canoe, and that's why I go into the bayous to harass the alligators. Right.
What do you mean to harass the alligators?
Well, just give them a hard time. The alligators, the snakes, anything that lives in the bayous. Just to
It's
give
not
them
scary to be like in a little canoe and have the alligators right there?
ignorance is bliss. I didn't know any better. And so with the sharks in Florida, I didn't know any better either. And that's why I traveled in the canoe the coast of Florida, because I simply don't know about the sharks, so ignorance is bliss. And right next door, they have that outfit that's called Shark Channel for a reason, but I simply
You didn't
don't,
know.
and I still don't know.
So the bayou, and I was talking about the insects, but you said it wasn't as bad in the
In the winter
winter?
time, it's not bad, but you see the slides where the alligators slide down.
Yeah.
I mean, surrounded by him, and the snakes in the trees with the Spanish moss and whatnot. And that is one of the places, if you run across a dinosaur,
you wouldn't be surprised.
you wouldn't be surprised.
It's kind of otherworldly.
It is otherworldly, just like Queens Canyon over there. Over there, if I run into a dinosaur, I wouldn't be surprised either. And there are places like that.
Yeah, like I was saying up in the rainforest in Oregon, that
Yeah,
if a hobbit had popped out from behind a tree, he would have just fit right in. I wouldn't have been too surprised.
absolutely, absolutely. So we have a lot of those places here. But like every beautiful place, no matter where on that planet we live, if there is a beautiful place, sooner or later people build a place there,
Yeah.
or they establish a park and stuff. And then for us, people like us, we just find some other place.
Right.
And so right now we're here in Courtside at COFA, which stands for King of Arizona. That's the old gold mine up there, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. COFA stands for King of Arizona. And if you go up to the park entrance on the right side, there's a tablet. They used to run tanks up there, General Patton.
Really?
Yeah. And supposedly they say there's unexploded ordnance and that stuff. That's from way back. But the tanks are gone and I'm here. So that's
We're
not a
very
bad
lucky to have all this public land here in the Southwest.
Oh, we have so much of that public land. And like always, some people abuse the privilege.
Right.
Some people take care of it. And God forbid if all of us would abuse it or all of us take care of it, because that is the beginning of the end. We would love that place to death.
Right.
And there would be so many outfits here, all the snowbirds.
But if people trash it out, the government will say, BLM will say, we're tired of it. You can't camp there anymore.
Every once in a while they try.
So we need somewhere in the middle, don't we, where it's not so wonderful that everyone wants to come.
And literally it's you have the good and the bad, and we are in the middle. And part of my job, which is not a job per se, but if I see garbage on the road or so, I pick it up.
Right.
And then I dispose it on the garbage containers in town.
Yeah, a lot of nomads do that. We'll go around and clear our area and leave it cleaner than we found it because we want to be able to come back.
Absolutely.
And not have government say, nope.
Yeah.
You abused it, now it's over.
But see, BLM land, there's a reason they put restrictions on it of 14 days. But the BLM people that I met in the years past, they enforce it. Some of them are sticklers, some of them are not.
Right.
And as long as a person doesn't homestead,
right,
they don't enforce that 14
Yeah,
days.
they don't notice, like, you and I are just here. We don't look permanent, but I've seen, like, in the back of some of the areas in Courtside, down, like way down Plumosa Road, you know those people have been there for months.
Yeah.
They're ensconced.
Yeah.
They got a shed and just garbage and
out here, that's that giveaway with people. Some people, I call them their trash bags. They collect that garbage and they pile it around, and they're homesteading.
Yeah.
Other people, they look like you and I, and we have a clean camp. And I don't think that...
And move around every once in a while.
Move around. And then BLM people, they're not overly concerned as long as you keep a clean campsite.
Yeah, be a good guest.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as you're a good guest, I think we'll be okay.
We will be okay. But it is a privilege to be out here, and it's unbelievable. I mean, like I said the other day, I've been coming out here for all those years. Sometimes longer, sometimes not so long, and now maybe I have to go back to California because of the old man.
Yeah.
And just play it by ear.
Yeah.
But COFA, which stands for King of Arizona, that's one of the places I always go.
It is beautiful here, and I like coming down here because Courtside's pretty crowded. Now there's a lot of people out here, but it's not like it's not like Courtside.
Yeah.
So, and the mountains, and it's just beautiful.
Courtside is beautiful in its own right, but a lot of the snowbirds, they only feel comfortable if they are parked right next to each other.
Right.
And the reason
close to the dump station
and close to a dump station.
Like at the LTVAs.
Yeah. But see, the minivan right here, that thing and that little trailer and the motorbike, that's the most I ever had in my life. Before, when I was a hobo, or when I was living on the motorbike, or Cornelius, or hitchhiking, and it didn't matter. Either you do what you can or you don't.
Do you have any
And
other adventures that we've missed that you want to talk about? Yeah, one
dude,
more to throw in there.
I got so many adventures, but not really adventures. They're just stuff happens.
Well,
I
to,
mean,
to me and probably everyone watching, every like job you've had is like wow, wow, wow. You know, just they seem adventurous to us. So
I mean, who would say that being a dishwasher in Dawson City, and I got fired off of that job, right? But that's not adventurous either. It's just if you need money for traveling, then you take whatever you can.
well, the whole thing's an adventure. How's that? Your life seems to have been an adventure. You don't see it that way?
No, it's just I take a lefty, I take a righty, and
well, a lot of us are going a lot straighter than you are. You're going way left and way right compared to a lot of us.
Well, that's true.
But I think that's fascinating.
Well, it is fascinating.
Yes. He loves his mommy.
Yeah, you know.
Sorry. Action.
There you go. The enduro I ran across, and the money was right, and the bike has more experience from the person I bought it from, so I couldn't say no to that.
Yeah.
But I lived on different kind of motorcycles when I crossed the country, and that old blister, that's just what I have.
Mm-hmm.
So I make it work until I hit the soft sand, and then I have to put it in neutral, get off the bike, kick it into first gear, and then run alongside the motorbike to get out of the soft sand. So God forbid that I would have a heavy motorbike that I cannot.
Couldn't get out. Couldn't get
get
unstuck.
out.
Don't growl. Why are you growling?
Oh, I just saw the other vehicle pulling in up there.
Yeah? You're not happy here now?
Well,
Too many people?
it's getting crowded,
Mm.
but that's all right. I mean,
No.
no, I'm reading that book of that big game hunter in Africa. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm just looking to the south, and there's nobody there. Towards the balloon up there, and people
Down
here.
towards Yuma?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but see, people here that don't go on walkabout. They don't.
Yeah.
So when I look up north, I see all those rigs, but I look towards the south and there's nothing there. It's empty. So maybe later on I go for a walkabout. So play it by ear.
Like in Australia, go to walkabout.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, buddy.
Buddy.
Well, I'm here, so they're here. I'm gonna go back to my book about Africa. It's information in the purest sense. And we live such a charmed life, and we talk about the stray dogs, the bears, and all that stuff. But Africa is a serious place with the man killers.
Yeah.
And why would they not? Man is the easiest prey there
We're
is.
made of flesh just like all the other animals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And simply because we think we're humankind doesn't mean animals think the same way.
That's right.
Ah, buddy. So, it's information. whether one agrees with it or not.
Right.
And I don't agree
Take
with
it
that.
for what you want.
But you take it for what, not for what you want, but what it's there for. That's why he wrote it.
Right.
And he's such a good writer where he always says, in my opinion. So it's what he observes, right? And then whether one agrees with it or not. So I quit killing for meat a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago. I don't have to. But before that, I was ferocious. And if he could walk, I killed it and I ate it.
For food.
For food.
Not
it was,
for fun.
No, it was never for fun. It was never for, I never called it a sport. It was always for food, but now I don't have to. But he's in a different league, right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless.
And in some places, there's not a choice.
In some places, there's...
Places like this, like if you actually lived here, you'd eat animals because you can't grow crops, it's too dry. So you eat the animals that can survive here and you eat meat. Or the Eskimos, you can't grow crops in the Arctic, but you eat the seals.
Have you ever spent time with the Inuit?
No.
Oh, I used to live with them up in Eskimo Point.
Oh my God, I wish I had this one. See, these are the kind of stories I wanted to record.
But the thing is, it's such a harsh environment.
Yeah.
And when I arrived up there, Elsie, my, at the time, lady friend, she was a flying nurse. So she picked me up with the Skidoo, with an old snowmobile. And the Skidoo, it was 70 below. And I just came from the coast up in British Columbia. So you get the idea, right? So the Inuit, it's a totally different gig. When I lived up in Alaska, it was a totally different gig. British Columbia in the mountains with Cornelius, Corny for short, it was a totally different gig. Africa, I mean, just reading that guy, it's like, are you kidding me? And I almost ended up there with a motorbike going cross country. And I did meet a guy in my travels. He was from outside Kruger.
If you feel like chat, just use my chair and you can talk to me while I cook, if that's what.
Oh!
Yeah.
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 And he and his father, they lived outside of Kruger National Park in South Africa. And so when I spoke with him, when I got to meet him, and I don't even remember where I met him, but he was talking about traveling on his enduro with his dad, cross country.
On his what?
On his enduro.
What's that?
Oh, that's like the motorcycle I got. It's a street legal dirt bike.
Okay.
But reading that book, you talking about lions and elephants and rhinoceros and stuff. It's like, are you kidding me? I would, but life is too short.
Dangerous. Yeah.
Well, it's just too short for that kind of
that
stuff.
kind of risk?
The next life, absolutely I will do it. But right now I'm here. And the thing, Phyllis, is when I was traveling in New Zealand and Australia, I had to decide whether to come back here or spend time on a tall ship in New Zealand, like you're talking about Vanuatu, Fiji, and it's like tall ships, sail ships. It's like, oh my fucking God.
Yeah.
My heart. Anyway, so I had to make the decision.
Right.
And obviously I decided against it because I'm here. If I would have stayed over there, I wouldn't come back to the West Coast here. And then I would not be here. I would not meet you, buddy.
You would have missed all the experiences that you've had here.
All of that, every last one of them. So I'm hoping, well, when I fall by the wayside, I'm going to come around.
Come back.
And the next life, if it happens, we'll see. If it happens, when it happens, if it happens, right?
Sure. Oh, you never know.
You
Or
never
you could
know.
come back as a dog.
Oh, if I come back as a mutt or
I hope I find you
cat.
and you come back as a...
Yeah, but then you have to go up to Oregon because I decided long time ago that I gonna come back as Jamie's mutt.
Aw,
Yeah, because
that's nice.
she takes so care of her pups. I call them pups, but
Yeah, they're
Kai-
her babies.
they're her family.
Yeah,
And
he's my best friend.
yeah, and so are the kittens.
No joke, he's my best friend.
Absolutely. Anyway, next life we
Next
talk.
life you'll be Jamie's mutt.
Yeah, and then you're gonna come back up to Oregon, and maybe you meet me as a mutt, maybe you don't. Who knows?
I had a dream one time that I was an animal. I'm guessing I was dog-sized.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was. But it's the most amazing dream I've ever had because animals don't think about the past or the future. You're just living
Yes.
moment to moment to moment. And I've never felt more alive than I did in that dream because of that feeling where you're just living without thinking about anything but I'm hungry and I gotta take a shit or watch out for that animal over there that's bigger than I am.
Absolutely.
And it was, they have something we don't have, that immediacy of life.
Have you ever seen that movie Quest for Fire?
I haven't.
Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That is one of the movies. The library up north is one of my go-to places.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get the movie like Quest for Fire, I make sure they have it or they will have it. And then I get it, right? But we used to have that animal instinct, and we lost it.
Yeah.
Or we put it aside, cover it.
Civilization.
Absolutely. But so we used to have that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, please.
I think it's when we started agriculture. Because we used to live hunter-gatherer and you lived, you moved, you did. And then when we had to settle down, and of course it was better for fewer people starved because you could have more reliable food supply.
Yeah.
But I think once we stopped moving and planted food and then we're stuck to the ground and then you live for the crops and you live for the rain.
Yes. Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, there is that trilogy of books, hardcover books. The first book is Germs, Guns, and Steel. And it talks about that, right? And the so-called evolution. And the guy who wrote it, it's his idea of what might have happened, like every writer does, right? But Guns, Germs, and Steel, it talks about that. And that's when the people became so-called wealthy, where we could afford politicians, we could afford warriors.
And boxes that we live in.
And boxes that we live in, right. And
there's a loss. There was a benefit because fewer people starve, but there was a loss.
Absolutely. And now the flip side is, if I look at Joshua Tree, for example, not so long ago, let's say 200 years ago, people were hunter-gatherers and they just traveled through until the environment could not support them anymore. And then they moved on.
Yeah.
You look at it now and it's artificial. It's that artificial bubble. And it's like a bubble like under the ocean, in space.
The original people in the United States, the first tribes, I think you call it now, the Native American people in the United States, lived that way.
And my forefathers, they got kicked out of Russia for one reason or the other, but maybe they were one or they were the other one, and that's why they ended up in Germany, right? So I don't know. But what the fact remains that in Joshua Tree nowadays you could not have the hunter-gatherers because of the artificial bubble. right?
And all the land
But-
is owned. You can't.
Well, no.
You can't go hunt on someone else's land,
Uh,
right?
there are no critters, but it's all BLM land, just the same as it is
Yeah,
here.
I know what you mean. But
But-
most of the United States is owned. The land is owned, so you can't just.
You can talk with people, with landowners, and if they're so inclined, they give you permission to hunt their land, like up in Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. But it's not a guarantee.
Right.
But there is so much BLM land where you can camp, where if you see a critter, you can kill it.
I've seen
for
plenty
food.
of pieces of deer carcasses out in the
See,
middle of nowhere.
I haven't.
The spot I saw the most, it was south of the Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you go out
Yeah.
really far out, there's deer carcasses. I know people are just
Yeah.
hunting them and eating them out there. And they butcher them right there and, eat them.
See, when I lived on the tableland, which is on the way, well, it's east of Klamath Falls in Oregon.
It's a beautiful
In-
area.
It is absolutely gorgeous. But up there we had hide hunters. And hide hunters, they were
Oh.
native people. They came off the reservation.
Yeah.
They killed critters for the hide, and they left the carcass to rot. So that's the flip side of it.
Right. That's wasteful.
It's not only wasteful, but it's a total disrespect.
Disrespectful. I was just thinking of that word, yeah.
Absolutely.
Disrespectful of the animal. You've
Absolutely.
probably never seen the movie Avatar. You might want to watch that movie.
I've seen that movie.
When they
yeah.
kill, I remember the woman, she was a hunter, and just before she killed the animal, she thanked the animal for its life and its contribution to their lives by feeding them. They respected the animals that they killed, that they ate.
See, the old German...
They actually thanked the animal before they killed it.
Yeah. The old German tradition is you take a sprig of the animal that you killed after the fact, where it was grazing on, and you dip it in the blood of the animal, and then you put it in the band of your hat.
Wow.
And that's the...
It makes you remember the sacrifice of the animal. Or is it not that?
I don't know if it's a sacrifice, but it's the respect of the people have towards the critter that they just killed. But when they kill a critter, they never, it's never a sport, right?
They do it because
It's-
they have to eat, so they can live.
Maybe that.
I'm sorry,
But-
you go ahead.
No,
I'm
no.
gonna stop.
But for the most part, I believe it's they like if you hunt a wild boar, for example, the chance is a 50-50 chance that you get killed by the boar.
Wow.
But you have because of the fighting
We have
cats.
wild boar in Texas. They're very dangerous.
They are, but nothing like the wild boar we have in Africa. So,
I'm
but
sure.
nevertheless, the point is there's a 50-50 chance, right, that you will make it. And that's what people always did. If you watch that movie, Quest for Fire, where they hunted mastodons with spears,
Yeah, they could have died in any hunt.
chances are they did, but maybe they didn't.
Yeah.
And they survived.
And then they live.
And they lived, and that's why we're alive. So everything should be a game of chance. Everything.
And it's like we were saying before that we're animals too. And it's
Absolutely.
you eat one day or you're eaten. We're
Absolutely.
animals just like the animals that we eat.
Absolutely. And it shouldn't be any different. There should be no guarantee.
Yeah, I used to have a friend, I cooked a fish, a whole fish, and the head and everything, and she wouldn't eat it because she could see the eyeball.
Yeah.
She wanted her meat to be from the grocery store wrapped in saran wrap and not, so
Yeah.
she didn't have to think about what it was.
Right.
I said, it's better, maybe you'll eat less meat if you have to look at the eyeballs.
If that's what it takes, good.
But she didn't
Good.
want to think about it being the animal.
Yeah.
She wanted her meat wrapped in saran wrap.
Mm-hmm.
No eyeballs, no tail. You know, she didn't want to think about what it was.
And
But I actually don't eat much meat. I do eat meat,
yeah,
but I know what it is. It's an animal.
absolutely. And the animal and the fish and whatnot. And I love chicken and whatnot. I used to work in a chicken house in Israel, and God forbid.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, but
they're horrific places. I don't know what that was like, but the mass farms are just
it was
immoral. They're immoral.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I still love to eat chicken, and I love to eat meat. And when I worked up on the cattle ranch on horse, right? Now they turned it into you call it feeding. Whatchamacallit? Where they force feed the animals.
Oh, a feedlot?
Yeah, a feedlot.
Yeah, they do that at the end right before they slaughter. They'll have them, like the cows, they'll have them out grass-fed, and they take them to the feedlots and they stuff them with corn so they get fat.
Absolutely.
Right before they kill them. Yeah.
And
those feedlots are sad to see.
Well, they're horrible to see. And I will never go back to the cattle
And you
ranch.
can look at the animals' eyes and they're sad.
They're not only sad, but they quit. There's more power in a carrot than there is in those critters up there in a feedlot. But what I'm getting at is I still eat meat, and I like meat, but I will never forget where it comes from.
Right. I
It
think
is
that's
what-
important.
Well, it is important, but that's America. It's that
Yeah.
sterile thing. When I listen to PBR, the radio station, right? And PBR, they have that thing, careful, there's gunfire in the background. You might want to avoid listening to that. Are you fucking nuts? Excuse my language, but
Yeah.
that is crazy, right?
Yeah.
That's that sterile thing.
I don't want to see the eyeballs of what I eat. I want to pretend it's not an animal.
Absolutely.
I want to pretend I didn't kill another animal like me
Yeah,
so I can have dinner.
absolutely. Oh, we're on a bad subject.
No, I
Oh,
think
buddy.
it's important people need to respect what they eat. When I lived in Dallas, I had a friend who had a ranch,
Yeah,
and she did the opposite. All of her animals, she loved them.
yeah.
They did not go to feedlots. And her meat was really tough because the animals were out running around,
Free.
living. These animals
Absolutely.
had beautiful lives before they became dinner.
And we did the same thing up there before it became a feedlot. Like I said, I was on a horse on the old Arab, and I was checking the cows every morning. That's what I did, right? So there were free roam grazing cattle. But then when the old man fell by the wayside, one of the boys turned it into a feedlot.
Yeah, you make more money fattening them up.
You make a lot more money, and you lock in on the price per pound and whatnot.
And it takes less land.
And it takes much less land.
Right.
Absolutely. But, oof, we're on a bad subject. Anyway.
I don't think so. I think it's something people should think about.
Well, everybody should think about it.
That's what I mean.
If you think that I go into a greenhouse and I pull a carrot, and a carrot has feelings, a carrot has a memory, a carrot, they figured out with the sensor that when you talk harsh to a vegetable, the vegetable reacts. If you talk kind to a vegetable, no different from a critter.
I think there's a connection, and there is a connection. I've read studies about when you go out in forest, the trees are actually talking to each other with their roots.
Absolutely.
And I can't remember what kind of tree it was. There was a study where they actually saw there was one tree that was having trouble, and the other trees actually fed that tree
Absolutely.
through the roots.
I just finished a book.
And by the way, that's a real scientific study. That's not just something I read on the internet. That's a real, scientifically valid phenomenon.
And it's the truth, because I finished that book about 2 weeks ago, and it was talking about the same subject, the trees, how they interconnect.
Trees
and everything.
and they can live thousands of years.
Absolutely.
There are trees older than the United States government.
Absolutely.
Before the revolution, there are trees older than that.
Yeah.
It's, who knows what they know?
If a person goes to the redwood forest, for example, Northern California, Southern Oregon.
There's some old trees out there.
There's some old trees there, and they're so majestic. And just to be there, to look at those trees, look up at the crowns of those, try to look up at the crowns of those trees, I'm absolutely speechless.
Yeah.
I don't have the words.
I know. Have you ever just like put your hand on a tree just to try to feel?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why
my ex-husband used to laugh at me when I would talk about stuff like this. I was like, no, there's something there. I can feel the tree.
Absolutely.
It's not just a hard thing. I feel the tree.
When I had the property up on the tableland, there were 4 or 5 of those big trees that I took care of on that little piece of land that I had. And I gave him hugs in the morning. I gave him hugs whenever I felt like it. I put hands on him.
And the tree might not know what a hug is, but when you're hugging, you're feeling something, and they're feeling that feeling that you're feeling when you're hugging them.
And for the most part, it was about me. But the fact of the matter was that I was giving that tree a hug. And
the tree probably felt it in some tree-like way. However they feel. We don't...
Maybe.
We don't know, because we're humans, we don't know how they respond or feel or whatever, but I think they know in some way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I agree with that. And that's why I have brothers up there, and they're rednecks, right? And when they say, oh, you're one of the brush huggers, I say, absolutely I am. But there is a brush hugger or a tree hugger with common sense. There are rednecks with common sense. It's the common sense that's really important, regardless of the label that I go by, but the common sense. And that's what I said.
And having
before.
Your eyes open, in a way.
Well,
to what's possible.
Yeah, and that's in direct correlation with common sense for me.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's what common sense is having your eyes open.
Absolutely.
Instead of just making decisions and reactions based on what's in your brain and facts and knowledge, is common sense is having your eyes open to what's there.
Yeah.
And reacting to that.
Absolutely. I agree. And there's so many people that I don't know if they're Republicans or Democrats, and I don't care about that, but they have the common sense. So therefore, it doesn't matter what side they're
But I really think
on.
Common sense, you have to be a little bit open. Like in that movie Avatar, when the human is talking to the spiritual leader of that tribe, she says, you can't fill a cup that's already full.
Absolutely.
You have to have your eyes open.
Absolutely.
To new information.
See, that one actor, John Wayne, right? He plays all those cowboys
yeah.
and soldiers and stuff. But at one time, he was so fed up with America, where he volunteered to immigrate to Mexico to get the Mexican citizenship.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either until a few years ago. And all of a sudden, he entered a totally different gig, in my opinion, right? And I don't...
Of awareness or...
Yeah, awareness.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if he was a redneck deluxe or not. But the fact that he was fed up with what we force onto people out here put him in a different realm, right? So even him and every cowboy, every ranch hand that I know adores that man. But do they adore him for the right reason? Do they actually know that he was fed up with America to
or
the
just
point?
like his movies?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that keeping your eyes open, but to be realistic about what's going on around you.
Yeah.
Right? And that's so important. And that's where the critters come in. The fish with the head on the eyeballs
Right.
looking at you, the cows, the calves, the pups, he's asleep, all of that stuff, you know. But if a person walks around town, for example, even in courtside, probably 70% of the people actually make eye contact.
Real eye contact.
Real eye contact. In other places more so, in other places less so.
Yeah.
But even here courtside is a learning experience. When people, I had people coming
You know,
up
in
to
Texas we do.
in
We
Texas.
wave to everyone and we look at everyone
Yeah.
and even honestly like I'll call everybody honey and darling because you're another person like me, and that it's
Right.
even saying honey and darling is like shaking someone's hands. It's almost like touching you.
Absolutely. And that is one of the reasons why I have much respect for the people that I met in West Texas. East Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, maybe not. And I don't want to talk about that. But in West Texas,
Yeah.
I can relate to those
Yeah.
people. And the eye contact absolutely can relate to that. And the eye contact is important for me. Not for other people, for some.
To me,
but
it's almost showing you myself. If I'm willing to look you in the eye, here's me.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And people who always want to look away, I was like, what are you hiding?
Yes, even though according to Mr. Capstick, who is that writer in Africa, he writes that some tribes in Africa, it's a challenge. It's a
Well, it could be
challenge.
like between two men, I guess, if it's depending on the situation.
In a critter, it could be.
Yeah, definitely a dog can take it as a challenge if you look them in the eye.
Can take it.
Can.
But not necessarily.
But he wouldn't, but
Yeah.
But he's safe.
Yeah.
But if they're not safe, they might take it more of a challenge.
Maybe. So there are all those maybes we're surrounded by, but it's our duty that we have to hash through that mix-up.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we're wrong, maybe we're right. Like I said before, maybe I wake up tomorrow morning and I figure, hey, wait a minute, that's enough. I'm going back home. Maybe, hopefully not. The same with the eye contact.
Yeah.
Maybe tomorrow I'm going to be a vegetarian. I hope to God not, because
Oh, I love meat. Oh, and
I love
if I
meat.
can interject, I spent a summer in Denmark when I was 16.
Yeah.
And I was on a farm, and they had pigs. Pigs are as smart as dogs.
Absolutely.
And pork is like my favorite meat, but I was like, oh my, it made me so sad.
Yeah.
That, the pig, I would go out in the morning and the pigs would come out and greet me, and I'd scratch them behind the ears like a dog. And I do still eat pork, but less, because it's like eating a dog.
Everything is, and it has to be a compromise. Some cultures,
But it's better. I'm glad that I know.
Absolutely.
I respect the animal.
And then you decide.
Right.
Absolutely.
Whether I want to sacrifice that other animal.
See, when I lived up in British Columbia, there was a buddy of mine at the time, and he had 2 pigs. And we were forced to butcher one of the pigs. And then he gave it a teddy bear as a companion, and then wouldn't you know it, the remaining pig ate the frickin' teddy bear. It's like, are you kidding me? But nevertheless, pigs are so smart.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because who meets a pig?
Better late than never.
I know, but most Americans don't meet a pig. Like you might
That's-
drive by a massive
Yeah.
farm and see them,
Yeah,
but this was a small family farm,
right.
and the pigs were just there
Absolutely.
and sweet. And people think of them as dirty. Pigs love to be clean.
Absolutely.
They only roll in the mud to cool off and get the bugs off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're smart as dogs, and they're very affectionate.
Yeah.
And they love to be scratched behind the ears, just like dogs do. And they love their babies.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And don't get me wrong, I still love to eat bacon.
bacon is so fucking good. Oh my god,
it is.
bacon's like my favorite meat. Oh my god.
But at least a person knows where it comes from.
Right.
It does not come from a store.
It doesn't come from saran wrap.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Pigs are not born in small pieces of saran wrap.
Yeah.
They're animals with eyeballs.
I'm out of here.
All right.
I'll see you later, Phyllis.
Bye.
Bye.
Great talking to you.
Likewise. That's when that one dude showed up with that push-up toy in the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't remember if it was that year, years before, years after, where I learned not to judge people by what they're doing.
I try not to, but it's hard not to.
It's human nature.
It's human to judge.
Absolutely. And we're all humans. So we always judge, we always pretend, we always take care of what we have. That is human nature.
Probably how we survived early and now is
Absolutely.
being confident in ourselves and
Absolutely.
living the way that we think works for us.
If-
Because if it works for you, then you've survived, so you're going to continue to live the way that you've been living, and other people
Bingo.
should learn the way that you live because you've survived.
Bingo. But those people, they think the same way about
Right.
us. And if a person watches that movie, Quest for Fire, and don't get me wrong, but that is one of the movies that I always watch.
I'm going to watch it
Because it's such a simple reminder. And the thing about the movie is that the fire went away by a freak accident, and they have to make tracks, right? And don't forget, it's a movie, it's Hollywood, but they have to make tracks, and they bring the fire back
But
where
I'm
they
sure it
come
had
from.
elements of reality.
So much of
Yeah.
it. And the elements of reality was the pure survival, what
Right.
a person is willing to do.
And how close you are to not making it
Yeah,
because there's some things that you have to have, and if you don't have one of them, you could die.
you can die
Food,
very
fire,
easy.
water,
And
shelter, not getting eaten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not only that, but when you're in dire straits and other people think that is funny, that is not a good feeling,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
It's ugly.
it is ugly, absolutely. So it's one of the movies, and I always say that never forget that it was made by a person.
Right.
It's a
It's
Hollywood.
not real.
It's
It's
not
It's
real.
not history.
But it has
Elements.
in it. And all the books that I carry down there, it's somebody's opinion what might have happened.
Right.
And then it's my job to sort through that stinking
But definitely
mess.
they were living on the edge. They needed certain things to survive, and you couldn't survive without those few things. Right?
You could, but it would not be an easy way to survive.
Right.
You can, but it's
But
never easy.
they were more like you can go to the food bank and get food. Like so it's different now.
It's way different.
Yeah.
When I rode the freight trains, right, I went through Texas and all of that stuff, and it was a hard way of life. But the time that I had to think about things, I wouldn't trade it for nothing. When I wrote Cornelius about the country, I wouldn't trade that for nothing. When I worked up on the lakes, running the go-fasts, the boats, I wouldn't trade that for nothing. All of that is part of what makes me. Yeah. If only one part of it was missing, I wouldn't be me. I would be something totally different.
Right.
Maybe not. But
I love that you always say maybe.
Dude, that's just how it is.
No, but people think everything's solid and this is what I know.
It's not.
And you always say maybe. I love that.
Yeah.
Maybe's important. Maybe's about, like what I said before, you can't fill a glass that's already full.
Yeah.
If you know, then you can't learn.
Absolutely.
And if you always say maybe, I'm going to remember that. That's maybe. And you even said for me, maybe I won't want to live in a van later. I should hold on to
tomorrow morning.
I should hold on to maybe.
No,
that's a great lesson. I need to always have maybe.
See, the word maybe is so important to me because I literally don't know if I wake up in the morning, period. If I wake up in the morning, there is that maybe, and that maybe might extend into next week, next month, next year. Who the hell knows? But maybe it starts tomorrow morning. It's
well,
definitely
I'll tell you
maybe.
something I don't usually tell people because they get upset. I have some health issues I don't have. It makes things more important, and you appreciate everything. To me, it's not. I mean, in the beginning, it was hard. But once you accept it, I'm gonna live my life until I'm not living, and I'm just living, and appreciating everything.
See, okay, the first thing is you mentioned the word living versus existing. Living.
Yeah, I'm not existing. If I'd stayed in my house, I would be existing.
Yeah.
I'm living my life.
Living.
And I'm going to live my life until the day I drop on the floor.
Yes. So the living is so important. Existing, everybody exists.
And like I said before,
hopefully. But the reason I say that is because I have an ex-buddy of mine up in the North Country, and he talked, he was a veterinarian, right? And he retired. And when we sit down, we talk like you and I, and wouldn't you know it, he has melanoma, where one part of his face drops. He goes to Stanford because he got the resources to get chemo, and all of a sudden everything that we talked about went out by the wayside. So what we talked about and what is reality, it's two different things.